I also want to bring you a comment that he made. We have been waiting about whether he would respond to Mark Carney's provocative speech yesterday at the Davos Forum. And here's what the president said about Canada.
Canada gets a lot of freebies from us, by the way. They should be grateful also, but they're not. I watched your Prime Minister yesterday. He wasn't so grateful. But they should be grateful to us. Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements.
So that from the president about Canada and Mark Carney's speech yesterday. I want to bring in Mike Crawley, our correspondent in Washington. Well, there you have it. He was watching Mark Carney, and that's what he said. What was behind that?
Certainly sounds like a veiled threat there, Susan, doesn't it? Better watch himself next time he speaks. Look, I think it's interesting that Carney's speech has been, was brought to Trump's attention, as obviously, Canada isn't necessarily the biggest thing on his mind at the moment, but you called it a provocative speech from Carney. I guess it definitely provoked Trump. I think what people are going to be wanting to know now is whether that position that Carney is taking, the sort of really calling out Trump's tactics, is seen as a sign of strength. That's what a lot of folks are saying. It's time to stand up to what Trump is doing rather than flattering him like a lot of world leaders have been doing. So. There's that watch yourself threat hanging over this, but I didn't hear anything very specific about what Trump is wanting to do. I actually really think obviously that's the biggest thing in the speech for a Canadian audience, but the more profound stuff is on NATO, really. The way he tied his ambitions for Greenland to his grievances over NATO, really minimizing the significance of the ask for Greenland, calling it, a piece of ice, while at the same time talking about how important it is. It's right in the middle of, in his words, between U.S. and Russia and China. And then, slamming NATO, saying, we've done so much for NATO, never got anything from NATO, ignoring all of the contributions of NATO nations. I think those are the real implications that world leaders are going to be concerned about.
Mike, I'm going to go to Catherine Cullen in just a moment, but on that point, one thing he said really stood out to me. After he said, we want negotiations, we want use force with Greenland, he said, we want a piece of that, a tiny piece of ice, that cold place, poorly located for world international protection. That's why we want it. And then he said, they have a choice. They can say yes, and we will be very appreciative, or they can say no, and we will remember. Sounds like a veiled threat as well.
Yeah, I actually that was a quote that I pulled up as a veiled threat. So. We will remember. It's very ominous, isn't it? You can. He's kind of gotten at this a little bit over the past number of weeks. There was, I think the wording was, you can do it the easy way or can do it the hard way, right? This is Donald Trump, the deal maker, leverage. It's just ramped up, and the way that it is linked to. His feelings about NATO, that's also a bit on the ominous side there, Susan.
Thanks, Mike. Catherine Cullen, turning to you in Ottawa. Obviously, interesting comments about Canada. Do you want to add on that?
I think the phrase, more than anything that is going to come out of this for Canadians is Canada lives because of the United States. Obviously a chilling phrase, and again, perhaps not a surprise in light of many of the things Donald Trump has said in the past about the United States. But a big question that came from Mark Carney's speech yesterday, which has been widely viewed in Canada as a significant one, the articulation of a kind of Carney doctrine building on a lot of ideas that the Prime Minister has already put forward in his time time in office was how would Donald Trump react? Trump was not named specifically in a speech that called for middle powers like Canada to work together when large powers are not using their power appropriately. Clearly, Donald Trump was paying attention, and the consequences for Canada here, I think, are numerous. Obviously, all of this is coming at a time where we are in the midst of looking at a CUSMA review, so Trump's ire is certainly not going to be a good thing for Canada if indeed that is where he remains focused. But of course, it's right to talk about this bigger backdrop of NATO and Greenland. And I think when we ask ourselves what the actions are that we might see from Mark Carney in order to live by what he talked about in the speech, right at the end, he talks about the capacity to stop pretending. We have something too, the capacity to stop pretending, to name reality, to build our strength at home and act together. So how will Mark Carney demonstrate the kinds of things he's talking about? I think that may in its own way be a moving target. Just how far Donald Trump goes in the days ahead to fulfill his sort of lust for Greenland may to some extent force the Prime Minister's hand. He has to decide to what extent he's going to follow through on the desire to speak truth to power to some extent that he put forward in that speech.